Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Coffee Morning Show with me, your host, Henry Umney. This episode, I'm very pleased to be joined by my good friend, Seb Dewhurst, who's the General Manager at EASA Software. I've known Seb for over 15 years. Welcome, Seb.
Oh, thanks a lot, Henry. Glad to be here.
So just by way of introduction, for those who don't know Seb, founded a company called EASA in the year 2000 to facilitate, the deployment of engineering models. He led a buyout of EASA in 2008 and has continued to grow the company in lots of other sectors. And finally, in 2022, he oversaw the sale of EASA to Valaris, and he still remains at the forefront of the company as the general manager of the business. So, Seb, your first time at the coffee show, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Yep. Indeed. Well, it's customary always to ask our guests, how do you take your coffee in the morning? Cream,
no sugar.
Cream, no sugar. So, oh, good man. Traditional. I'm a double espresso man myself, but
Seb, on bad days, double espresso.
On bad days, yes. So, Seb, you and I have been helping organizations manage their EUCs and specifically their Excel-based EUCs for probably, it's quite depressing actually, for over 20 years. I guess in that time, we've heard many predictions from senior CIOs, CTOs, and analysts that Excel has had its heyday and we're predicting its demise. Yet here we sit today in 2024, still helping firms manage Excel-based EUCs. Why do you think that's the case?
I think there are a lot of reasons there. We can unpack it a little bit, but I think the single biggest reason is that Excel just remains easy to get to. It's on everyone's desktop. And it's good at what it does. It's very good and getting better. It's not a it's a moving target for those that come up with Excel killers. It's a moving target. You've got a big company that's still investing into the tool, to wit, for example, the recent Python capabilities within Excel. And to do what it does in any other way, you've got to be a pretty good programmer. And you and I'm not a programmer, haven't been for a long time, not since college days. If I can think of a model or a business case or business workflow or something like that of that nature, whether it's an engineering or technical model, will this thing break, will it blow up? Or if it's a financial model, will I make money on this deal? Will I not make money? Or a pricing tool. All of those, if you can think it, however complex, you can pretty much model it in Excel. And I just don't think that anyone else has come up with anything as good as Excel, with the big qualification of when you're using Excel locally on your desktop.
Yeah, I think to that, I think it's not just, I mean, I think, there are like much more accessible programming languages available. Most graduates come out of university with Python and other, to your point, programming skills. I think it's the ability to collaborate within Excel, which is unique to it. It does mean that I can create to your point, I can put my Python into calculations into Excel now. But I do have that ability to collaborate around the creation of that model, whatever I'm modeling out, whether it's some finances, whether it's modeling. And I did this years ago. I was modeled the was it the signals on a railway to prove you could move the signals and increase the throughput. Now, that collaboration with a number of people within an organization would be impossible through the Python code, but through that medium of Excel made it possible.
It's kind of the Esperanto, isn't it, of the modeling world. Everyone understands, well, English really, because Esperanto never took off. But it's it's the international language. It's the ubiquitous modeling language. And like, as I said, in our role, helping companies with Excel, we're talking one day with actuaries on Wall Street or in the Lloyd's market, and the next day we're talking with aerospace engineers in the Midwest. They all speak Excel.
So we're making the case that Excel is not going away anytime soon. Yet those CIOs and CTOs had that aspiration, and the analysts were helping fuel that Excel would disappear, but obviously it's not. So I guess the question really is then, what are the options for a firm that recognizes it has these very critical processes, EUCs run on Excel? What are the options for people that face that issue?
Well, a good colleague of mine once said that if there's a situation you don't like, there are really three options available to you. You can walk away from it, you can change it, or you can learn to live with it. Well, let's see what those three options translate to if you're faced with what we call Excel chaos, Excel causing problems. Walking away from it, I think if you can, you already would have done. If you can replace Excel, and indeed, in many cases, Excel has been replaced with off-the-shelf tools that are fit for purpose and are good, and you wouldn't even dream of going back. That's good, and that's progress, and that's right. That's just normal stuff. So I think if you can walk away from it, you will. If the end user app in Excel has become redundant or easily replaceable, you can try and change it. As I said, we've seen all kinds of promises of Excel, new flashy, Excel wannabes or Excel killers, all nice and web-based and slick and everything else. But the fact of the matter is we've not seen anything that actually really does take what has already been done in Excel. So taking a company's knowledge, their intellectual property that's been embedded for many years in some cases into a critical Excel model, and then translating that seamlessly into something else just doesn't seem to be something that's feasible technically. And then the third option is live with it, which implies do nothing about it, which in some respects isn't an option because we've already come to the conclusion you've got to do something about it. So what we propose, and I think what Cluster 7 helps with, is kind of combining the best of change it and live with it, and come up with actually a fourth option, which is to not try and throw away Excel, but at the same time put some guardrails around it, various stages of the workflow, to make sure that the tool is not being abused.
Yeah, and I guess so that makes sense to me, and obviously you and I understand that. And I guess when someone's embarking, excuse me, on that journey, one of the things they always get scared about is I've got thousands of Excel, hundreds of thousands, millions of Excel files out there. The reality is that the majority of those are not relevant to the business. So the thing that we really need to do is, if we're going to, as you quite rightly said, live with it, we need to define really what living with it means. So that's where the organization should have some form of policy or standard that's going to define what is acceptable to be run in EUCs, because your change it is still an option, but for a very small, in our experience, a small proportion of those EUCs. Yes, they will be moved in time into IT applications when we get the right amount of time and resource. But that living with it. So what are those? And so through that policy, we define what we care about. Then we create an inventory of all of those things. So what does that universe look like? And then to your point on the living with it, how does EASA and Cluster 7 help? Is from a Cluster 7 perspective, we can help you sort of locate those if you don't know, or making sure they're that your inventory is complete. Obviously, maintaining that inventory and understanding how they're being used. So and that usage is very important, which feeds into to where EASA comes in. So where we know that there is a spreadsheet that's you can give the examples of used by multiple people in the organization. EASA can then provide that provide the organization with I can't say it, operationalizing it, make it easier for everybody to use in a much more fashion. So maybe you talk about that, and I can talk about the other bits that
sure.
the cluster 7 bring in.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's well recognized that Cluster 7 is best in class at, as you said, getting your arms around for the folks out there that are building Excel models, and for the IT folks tasked with getting control of those. Obviously, Cluster 7 offers a suite of tools that are unparalleled, and I'm sure you're going to get into that a little bit more in a moment. Where EASA comes in is where you've done your consolidation, you've realized that a lot of the spreadsheets out there are actually clones of a master spreadsheet, which actually points to a particular kind of use case where EASA tends to be very, very valuable. And that use case is where you've got a master model. Let's use, for example, a pricing model. It's one of many use cases, but inherently, when you've got a pricing tool, in the insurance world, often it's referred to as a rating tool, pricing or rating or configuration, or deal valuator, something that's going to be done again and again inherently by lots of people in the organization. How do you prevent, with the best will in the world, you can have controls upstream of that, but how do you prevent the ubiquitous file save as, file save as, file save as, and creating hundreds of clones of that master version, which in turn dramatically increases the probability that one of those clones will be overwritten, will have something critical of formula in it overwritten inadvertently, and then inadvertently propagated as the master version. We've seen precisely examples of this. We have, in fact, one customer who uses Excel as a tool, as a kind of a calculational checklist to make sure it's preventative maintenance for chemical plant. And in one particular instance, it turned out that many years ago, the master version had become corrupted. Somebody had propagated a clone, and it had incorrect formula in it. And 9 times out of 10, that formula didn't make a big difference in the result. But come a perfect storm, a certain set of input conditions, it made a very big difference. Long story short, it brought a piece of plant, a plant generating something like $12 million of revenue per day, brought it down for an unscheduled fix for the sake of a $5,000 pump that failed, but would have been caught if the correct spreadsheet had been used. So this uncontrolled cloning of spreadsheets, and we're not talking here about the sort of use case where you can simply put the spreadsheet on SharePoint and everyone collaborates. SharePoint's a good tool, we use it ourselves. I'm talking more about the use case where inherently, here's the master version, everyone's going to clone it, they're going to input their conditions, generate a new case, a new price quote, a new engineering configuration, whatever their case may be, they're generating a new one and they're doing file save as. And that is something that we can immediately replace without eliminating, without losing all the strength and the agility, the flexibility of Excel that we all love. By using EASA, you can put a web wrapper around that spreadsheet and turn it into a proper app that is securitized and intellectually property locked down and version controlled and everything else that an app should be.
And what I love about it is you then have that in the database behind, so you've got all the MI about all of the different cases, and you can be able to, if it's the pricing one, I can see all the prices that I quoted people.
You can report, you can audit. Yes.
So much easily. I mean, and so if you then just sort of look at the overall solution, we can go and find all this stuff that sits out there that's not on the imagery. The imagery becomes the core central piece of that. Through the Cluster 7 technology, we can show you if that model evolves from version 1 to version 2, we can show you exactly that the Cluster 7 technology will automatically create an audit trail. There's also additional workflows if you want to sign off on those changes. And then what EASA does is, if it's appropriate, we'll then deliver that out to all of your users. So they're always on the set. EASA would make sure you're always on the same model, make sure that everything is using and pricing correctly, putting the right adjusting the parameters correctly, record results of that. If we need to make a change to that model, Cluster 7 will show you how that model has changed, and then you can put it back into deployment. So got a very robust, I guess, software development life cycle, which is run by the business, audited by the business, but we have technology providing that oversight and transparency that we need. Give us the operational efficiencies, but also keep those our audit colleagues at bay if needs be.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we look at it is that we help, the folks that develop Excel models, they're not forced to have the same kind of rigor as software developers do.
Mm.
You know, check in, check out of source code, collaborative tools, version control, all of that kind of thing. So in a sense, what EASA is doing is putting a layer of control over, we're not telling you how to use Excel. You can still go ahead and build your Excel models. But what EASA is doing is then putting that layer of control over it that kind of not forces, but helps those model builders behave more like software developers, you know, in terms of, you know, audit trail, version control, so on and so forth.
Well, sir, well, those of you listening, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. As you can probably tell, Seb and I could speak for probably the next 15 hours, let alone 15 minutes on this subject. Hope you've all found it useful. Seb, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Absolutely welcome.
For our virtual coffee, next time we're in town, we may have to upgrade that to a beer, but thanks very much for joining us.
Very welcome, Henry. Always good to meet you.